that leads into my very next question, which is, when you present evidence that Christ lived, died, and rose from the dead, what are your resources other than the Bible?
Well, now, first of all, I'll be glad to answer that. But if you ask that to atheist New Testament scholars or agnostic New Testament scholars, people like Bart Ehrman, people like Garrett Ludeman, Jewish New Testament scholars like Pinchas Lapid, Gezer Ramesh. Now, not all those are still living today, but we have their books. And if you were to ask them, they would say, time out. They'd say, now these are the unbelievers. They would say, if you're implying that sources in the New Testament are not reputable, then you're not doing history the way historians do history. And if you'd say, well, aren't Christian sources prejudiced? I think they would say, and Bart Ehrman does say, he'd say, we have many sources for the historical Jesus. He lists, for example, 15 different sources, independent. They don't rely on each other. They don't look over each other's shoulders. 15 sources for the crucifixion of Jesus, just that event, which of course leads to the resurrection. But 15 sources for the crucifixion, and he goes 100 years after the crucifixion. So he goes from 30 AD to 130 AD. And that's 100 years is very fair in the ancient world. For instance, we don't have a biography of Alexander until almost 300 years after he died. The early well-known sources, biographies of Julius Caesar or Caesar Augustus are Tacitus, Suetonius, and now they lived, probably these Roman emperors lived in some cases over 100 years before the sources. So it's gospel art 40 years later. And someone says, well, okay, it's earlier, but it's prejudiced because Mark's a Christian. Okay, then do you not count Roman historians who talk about their emperors when their religion, religion of the empire was the Roman Caesars who became gods? And Suetonius's book, The 12 Caesars, written well after Julius Caesar died, over 100 years. Of his 12 Caesars, by the names of 5 of them, it says later deified, later deified, later deified, later deified, and later deified. So if your emperor worship is your religion, you must not be trustworthy to talk about them. But everybody says, oh, no, no, no. What they say about the Caesars is fine. Okay, so there's not an analogous study here. But back to Bart Ehrman. In his 15 sources for the crucifixion of Jesus, a number of them are outside the New Testament. And I'm just thinking through his list. At least 2 of the 15 are not Christian. They are Tacitus, the Roman historian just mentioned, and Josephus, the non-Christian Jewish historian. So, in fact, in a recent dialogue on Jesus' existence, a group of skeptics said that the best secular sources for Jesus are Josephus and Tacitus, the same two. Anyway, long answer, I'm sorry about that, but I mean, sure, most of the sources are Christian, but nobody raises that objection for Romans writing about Roman emperors who are thought to be God. We don't have a source for Alexander earlier than 280 years later.
Alexander